Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Now, in September 2022, I was lucky enough to board a flight to Vietnam, where I'd be jumping in swamps, climbing up hills, and taking on one of the toughest challenges with an entire group of incredible, crazy, quirky, amazing, and inspiring individuals who I'm lucky enough to call my friends, as we all went over and took part in SAS Who Dares Wins. Now, with any kind of TV production, they are always constrained to fit the absolute best bits into a short window of time. So as you won't be surprised to hear, there is so much more to these individuals than meets the eye. So on this mini series of podcasts, you get to listen in as I catch up with this incredible group of people. We discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly as it comes to SAS Who Dares Wins, our favorite instructors, our biggest challenges, and also learn a little bit more about what drives them, what inspires them, and how this journey was for them. It's been so much fun reminiscing and catching up, so if you are sitting comfortably, let's buckle up for safety and get in there with today's episode. I'll see you on the other side.
Now, can you see me?
I can't see you, but I'd love to, because you're a handsome bastard.
You're the first. You're the first.
Hey, I've seen that lovely lady of yours. I'm not the only one thinking that. There he is. The cap and everything.
Good.
How are you doing, my man?
I'm all right, mate. I'm a bit all over the place, to be fair. It's been a whirlwind of emotions, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
You kind of go from crying to laughing to crying to why am I crying and why am I laughing? So I'm just trying to go with the flow and enjoy the wave of whatever's going on. But yeah, it's been surreal, as you can share with me.
Well, I think like it's a combination of things. It's a little bit like when somebody goes through a car accident, but it's also a little bit like death in a way, in that like there's stages to it. Do you know what I mean? You have that tearful moment, then you have that shock, then you have that reminiscing, then you have that romantic optimism about the future, but then there's also a sense of loss because you enjoyed it, but then also a sense of relief because you've gotten over it. And people think that you move through these things in like a sequential manner, but you don't really, because obviously we've got a little WhatsApp group with the team and stuff, and then you'll be unpacking your gear or you'll be doing whatever, and you'll have those little flashbacks, or you have those little moments or those things that trigger it, and yeah, it's kind of jumping through all of those emotions, and also having that surreal thing where you get plonked back into your normal life again.
Yeah, no, I think you've hit it on the nail, mate. It's going back to that, I call it kind of eat, sleep, shit, have a shower routine. And when you've gone, I'm saying that you've taken the opportunity to explore sides of yourself that you've never explored before, and then taking it into what I would call normal civvy life, and in a sense, for me anyway, I've already noticed that your threshold for normal, I would say, complacency and normal kind of moaning becomes a little bit shorter, because I've gone through, like yourself, willingly and chosenly to do it, but through a hell of a lot, both emotionally, more emotionally than physically, I would say, than your average person. And you begin to think, what are you moaning at? You have no idea.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I've been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents, and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. What made you actually want to come and do the show?
Good question. Well, with my own personal journey, it was a kind of reset. I called it a rebirth, actually, during my interviews. It was a matter of having spent an emotional amount of energy on trying to kind of fathom why the way I felt for 35 years. And obviously I'd explained to yourself, Pete, that I've got ADHD or adult ADHD. It was told to me by a psychologist only. I think it was like March last year. That was the ongoing issue with my thought process. So, for having argued with myself, argued with others, tried to rationalise mistakes, tried to rationalise big things that I'd done that were achievements, that I would have thought the average I suppose the average kind of mindset without ADHD would find either really a massive task or a really non-massive task. I found a lot of things quite overwhelming. So, cut a long story short, it was an opportunity to expose a lot of my weaknesses, expose a lot of my strengths, knowing why I felt the way I felt with my ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or ADD, attention deficit disorder now. I think it's called. Put myself in a very practical situation, and normally practical things I find much more manageable than academic things, where I feel less stimulated to do them. So that was one reason. Also forgiveness in myself, knowing that I was not an abnormal person. There was just a few wires kind of crossed in the wrong bits of my brain. So that was one massive.
Why did you need to forgive yourself for that?
Mistakes that I thought I'd made. With ADHD, you can become very overwhelmed by very simple tasks. For example, I'm saying simple tasks, it's maybe not a lot of simple tasks, but for example, when you're self-employed, handing in your end of year taxes, things like that people have a strategic order to do, sending mail, you've got a letter to sign, sending that back, ordering your prescriptions, reordering your prescriptions, going to a doctor's appointment. These things that most people kind of have a tick list to do, know they've got to do it. It's not a great task to do, but they do it. For me, I will file that right to the back, and I will prioritise things that would stimulate me and make me feel much more engaged in that activity. For example, going a 10-mile run, or watching a Netflix series. Do you know what I mean? And when I become so hyper-focused on that task, it's like I'm in there. So for me, there was lots of things that I put on hold that couldn't be bloody bothered doing. And I just thought it was because I was lazy, or I didn't have the academic ability to do it. That would cause arguments. I was like, I'm not doing this. This is bloody rubbish. What the hell am I doing this for? And it would get to a point like, Grant, have you done your taxis? And I was like, no, you've got 3 days to do it. And I'm like, right, it's fine. I'm going to go my run first, and then I'm going to do it. And then, Grant, you've got 2 days to do it. Yep, I'm going to go and I'm going to watch that final episode of X, Y, and Z. And it would go on and on and on. And then it would cause a massive arguments. And then I'd be like, you're calling me stupid. You're insinuating I'm lazy. And it wasn't that I was lazy. It was looked like I was being lazy.
Yeah.
And it would create this pressure.
But 35 is so not. I mean, you're still very young, but I mean, like, most people benefit from having this sort of diagnosis, hopefully when they're a lot younger in life. So you know, you've gone I mean, you've obviously gone 35 years, but I mean, like, the first 10 years of everybody's life, they're still trying to work things out, and hopefully they've got a supportive network to try and help them do that. But you've effectively done, 20 years as an adult, not really feeling like you're reading from the same script, or everything's not really making sense in the way that it does and that must have been a weird fucking torture, really.
It was. I mean, ironically, the first 10 years at school, the first 10 years of my life, even up till when I left primary school, my primary school was all right, because everyone more or less was made to kind of feel, I suppose, equal in a way. There was a level of empathy. It's when you went to high school and you were kind of having to try and operate more independently.
They try and funnel you into more academic metrics. That's when sets become things, and then we all start getting separated out. And if you don't think in the same patterns as other people, which I never did, then it can become much more obvious, can't it?
Yeah. You're separated and you're divided, and there's almost this kind of tier system of you're really intelligent or you're thick as shit. You're really quite an obliging, well-mannered school child or young adult heading into, you're kind of going from pubescent into kind of young, much more younger adult. You're either a well-behaved, well-mannered one of them, or you're just a spoiled, ungrateful little shit that doesn't adhere to the system and the rules. So I was kind of always the less academic, allegedly. Now I know why I wasn't. It wasn't kind of being less academic. It was I couldn't concentrate, and also I got my reaction to that was to rebel. So yeah, there was a lack of empathy. The funny thing was, when I was at high school, they would have meetings with me and my mum saying, "Listen, we think it's his epilepsy. You know, it's obviously he was diagnosed with epilepsy at 13. You know, there's been kind of a number of hurdles where he's had to go out into hospital with epilepsy. That's obviously had a detrimental effect to his education. He's not been at every class. So they kind of always had an answer other than there may be something more than just missing classes. And in the end, I left school just wanting to go. You know, I just wanted to go. And then obviously having been bullied, I got bullied a lot. You know, I just resented school, and I became angry, and I became so hyper focused on always being the just a victim. I had a victim mentality. I just felt that the world was against me. Became miserable, became angry, became low in self-esteem, to the point where I was almost trying to kind of showcase myself as this cool guy, you know, and trying to fit in, which made it worse, actually. Rather than kind of try and hide away from it, you know, I hid away from academics. I almost tried to be the funny guy, or I tried to be the wido, or I tried to center that attention around my personality rather than my.
Well, you do have a very, you know, eclectic. You're very gregarious. You're very engaging. You know, you were the life and soul of the party when we were in the room at times. You know, you're great for morale and stuff like that. But you're right. There's sometimes your greatest strength is sometimes sits right next to one of your scars, and for you that was almost a coping mechanism or a way of plastering over it, maybe, if I'm hearing you right.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's kind of mask over it. Don't think you're wrong there. And it's something that that coping mechanism, something that I've built over 35 years. And it's funny that you say that, because that was one thing that the psychologist says. He says, you don't have to go on tablets. You know, we can diagnose you with ADHD. There's not a lot of help out there. You know, you've coped for 35 years the way you've coped. And that's the way your body's built this system with managing situations. But I said to him, well, that's all very well if I want to lead my life the way in which I'm leading it now. But how can I grow and evolve if I don't know what my weaknesses are and how to manage those weaknesses and how to overcome those weaknesses? So what you're saying is you're not going to die. Nothing else is going to happen to you if you just choose to live the way you've lived your life for 35 years. You now have a label, which is often a helpful thing, because you can say to people, listen, if I'm acting a bit over the top or whatever, it's because I've got ADHD. Well, that's all very well. People, you can't just keep blaming your ADHD for the way you are. You know,
and it's great to hear someone who's actually suffering with it say that, because I empathize with that. But like you say, some people will choose to acknowledge it and then try and develop upon it, or some people use it as an excuse. And you're obviously not one of them people.
No, it's a bit like mental health. You know, it's, you know, with ADHD comes anxiety, can come a bit of depression, and often people use mental health words as almost like an adjective. It's, I'm feeling depressed today. Well, are you depressed or are you depressed? You know, you can't just wake up one morning and say, I'm depressed. You know, you can feel worried, you can feel angry, you can feel anxious, but clinical depression is different to feeling shit. You know, there's having a shit day and there's having a shit fucking day. Over and over and over and over again. So it's not an adjective, it's not a couple of adjectives that I pull out a bag and say, yeah, I've got anxiety today. You know, these things have the emotional. It's like an emotional blanket, isn't it? It's like a comfort blanket. I can't just pick up ADHD when I want to then pull myself out it. It's a bit like when I had been diagnosed with epilepsy. You know, it came as a good thing sometimes, because I'd been German and I fucking hated German. I love Germans, but I fucking hated the German language because I couldn't want to be bothered learning it. And I used to go, Mrs. Noble, I'm having one of these strange aura feelings and I'm going to now go. And it wasn't. I was just bloody bored. Mrs. Noble wasn't going to argue with that. She's like, right, Grant's having a funny feeling. She'd phone the base. Grant's, which is kind of where kids like myself, I don't know what the political correct term is, kind of the idiots
I think we used to call it reprographics or something. You just go and fucking sit in a small room with a sofa and they come and check on you every 10 minutes.
That's it, basically. Yeah, it's like a waiting room, basically. So I went down to the waiting room for individuals like myself, and I'd be sitting there like, well, it's just, I'd rather sit here than do German. So I used to kind of have this, it was like almost like acting lessons for pretending to have a seizure. So I was like, I'm feeling shit. And then she'd be like, right, Grant's coming down to the base, he's having a funny turn with his epilepsy. So I'd use that as an emotional blanket, I'd use that as a comfort blanket. I'd like, ding, out.
But then when you're an adult,
but then after,
that's what I mean.
sorry, yeah.
When you're an adult, that sort of shit doesn't cut it anymore. What made you want to get into the fitness industry? Because have you always been as that? You obviously said you were sort of fit as a child, but you because you went and sort of, I don't want to say you traveled the world, but you've really gone deep on that for a number of years.
Yep, that's correct. I went from I trained one of these kind of hyper focus moments. I trained as a professional dancer. Or in professional musical theatre.
Yeah, because we were having a conversation with Dan, weren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. So I didn't want to kind of go over the top in conversation with that, because obviously Dan's gig was and is as a professional dancer. That's how he makes his income. But what I found was his memory retention, which is really important as a dancer, quite overwhelming. I found my pace of learning was obviously different to the rest of the professional dancers and performers, singers, actors. I found it much more overwhelming to try and retain that information. So I got through it. A lot of anger and a lot of emotion and a lot of frustration at why I couldn't kind of pick things up as quick as I could. But anyway, I got there, and I got to the end of my college. A few disappointments as well. I won a scholarship to a dance school in London. Couldn't uptake it because financially I couldn't live down there with my mum and dad's income. Anyway, that's not a sob story for deprivation, social deprivation. It was just enormously expensive. So that was
mate, but I don't want to jump past that though, because I often say that the people that make it into things like that, and I've got Dan coming on in a few days, so I won't pretend to know his story until I've heard it properly. But the percentage, there's a great book called Bounce by Matthew Syed. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it speaks about the different sort of layers of people's ability to get into those sort of niches, and it comes from their exposure. Like if you weren't near a college that you could have done a professional or done an apprenticeship or done a qualification in dance, and then through those people it's whose parents are able to take them to the school every weekend or 3 or 4 times a week, then of those people who's got the funding to be able to send their children, and of those people who logistically can get to London or to amateur dramatic school, and it filters every time it goes through. And often, with the greatest respect, like the people that come out the end probably aren't genetically or from a skills base actually the best of the best. It's just one of those, it's a little bit of a lottery in there. There's a balance of skill, luck, discipline, dedication, but also opportunity, isn't there?
Yeah, you're correct. You've hit it on the nail. And I mean, I used to go down to London every second weekend from probably about the age of 14 to 16. So it was more manageable. I won what was called an associate scholarship. So what it meant was every second weekend, I would travel on the bus on a Friday night after school down to London. I would arrive in London Saturday morning, kind of 6 a.m. at Victoria bus station. There, travel, get a McDonald's or something cheap.
How old did you have been
then? 14.
Wow.
Probably 14.
Isn't that fucking mad, isn't it? If you you thought about sending your 14-year-old. I mean, I would still happily do it, but people are so scared about everyone's going to snatch their kid these days. People just wouldn't think of doing that, maybe.
Yeah, I think the first couple of times my mum came down with me, but then after a while it was becoming, again, financially a lot of money to kind of try and take every second weekend to go down to London, then travel from Edinburgh to Covent Garden. So I went down to Covent Garden every second weekend, and I loved it. Don't get me wrong, it was amazing. It was coming from Edinburgh, then going down to London. Covent Garden. I mean, Covent Garden's such a magical place.
It's like an epicenter of creativity, isn't it? It's amazing.
Oh, it's mad.
Just the street artists alone there are absolute world class.
Different level. 100%. And because the way in which my brain worked that I didn't know at the time, it was just this overstimulus of colour and noise and excitement. And I used to come back on the Sunday. I came back on Sunday. I would arrive back on Sunday night, and I would then kind of back at midnight. And then I would obviously kind of get back about 1, back at school on Monday morning. So that chapter was really exciting, which then led on to my audition for the full-time scholarship at the Ardang Academy in Covent Garden. Won the full-time scholarship, and then unfortunately, I remember the
What's
phone
that
call.
process like?
Like,
Sorry.
Grant,
So when you had to apply for that, there must have been thousands of people going for it. That can't be no small task.
yeah, no, it wasn't. It wasn't a small task. There was a lot of young kids. Let's be honest. I'm saying young adults. We were still kids. Probably 16. Yeah, 15, 16 at the time.
So competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there being hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And actually, ironically, I wasn't the first to get it. I was second, and there was another young girl that won it. She didn't take it, and then it was given to me, which I didn't care. It's a vicious industry. I was like, yeah,
No,
I'm
mate.
happy
Yeah,
to accept
100%.
it. I remember handing the phone to my mum, saying, "Mum, I've won the scholarship, the full-time scholarship." Mum came on the phone, and we spent months and months trying to find additional income to try and help me live down there. So although the entry was paid for 3 years, that was it paid for. To live down in London was a different ball game.
Oh, God,
And
yeah.
because having been the scholarship student, you were described as icing on the cake. You were the creme de la creme. You were the individual that was given
Yeah,
that
yeah.
opportunity for free. So a lot of people say, why wouldn't you work? Well, the reality of it is my responsibility would have been probably a lot more than it would be like being how you get prefects at school. I think they're called prefects in Scotland. I don't know what they
Yeah,
are in
yeah, they
England,
are, yeah.
but and then you get the head prefect, and it would almost be like being a head prefect. So there would be a lot of more responsibility. Obviously, my learning difficulties at the time that I was unaware why. I would have had to have worked 10 times harder. So I'm not quite sure where that at that time as a young adult, 16, where I was going to get the time to learn all these dance routines, learn all these acting pieces, learn all these songs, learn all these different, just a different way of life,
Yeah.
really.
Well, the
Harmonies and all
cognitive
this sort of
load you'd
stuff.
be taking on at such a young age there would be colossal.
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, phoned up the dance school and said that was it. Couldn't accept the scholarship just down to financial circumstances. They wouldn't accept. I mean, God Almighty, my mum worked part time in a supermarket. So ironic because of the overtime she had worked. The council, the Edinburgh City Arts Council, and ironically, it was the Manchester Arts Council. I don't know why it was them. Said that listen, due to you would have been able to been given extra funding, but because your mother's annual, you ready for this? Your mother's annual income on paper, part time, was £8,000 a year. Because she had gone from kind of £8,000 and up to £10,000 a year on overtime. You're not able to get the
I
funding
fucking hate
because
that, mate. And you
on
still see
paper,
that now where
yeah,
we reward people for being lazy. And I'm not saying that's what your mum is, but like when people try and
no,
make an additional effort, they try and really put the time in, they try and make something of themselves. They're almost less favored. They almost get punished. They're like, because we don't like my family, we're not rich or anything like that. We've got a house and horses and stuff like that, but we're not super rich. Worked all goddamn life, worked loads of different businesses, owned lots of stuff and all this sort of stuff, but we don't qualify for anything. Not that I would want anything, but it does leave that bitter taste in your mouth when you like your mum is working overtime, she's pushing the job, she's sending you to London every other weekend, and there'll be people who don't have that level of commitment to their family or that level of drive or compassion to really give somebody an opportunity, and you almost get handicapped for it.
yeah. And she also had my twin brother. You know what I mean? So she had my twin to think about as well. You know what I mean? There was he's the one like
Where
yourself,
was your
like
dad?
Arnold Schwarzenegger now, like Danny DeVito. But my twin brother, he's a police officer now. So it's I don't know how she managed it. You know what I mean? She was trying to manage both emotions. My brother was a bit more rational, a bit more introvert. In fact, he is much more introvert than I am. So she's trying to manage his emotions, his future, and also mine at the same time, as well as my dad. My dad was trying to help as well, but yeah, what a bizarre chapter.
That's
But
got to be
it
a massive
evolved.
setback. So what would you have been then? 16, 17?
16, 17, yeah, correct.
So what
Yeah,
did you think your future looked like
22.
for you? Because you'd spent like 2 or 3 years then going, this is what I'm aiming for. This is what I'm going to be. I've been traveling down. I've been putting so much time and commitment into this thing. And now it feels like it's all come to nothing.
Yeah, I kind of done the same thing, but I done it in Scotland. So I went to a local college, which was good. Don't get me wrong, it was all right. It wasn't. It didn't have the London vibes. You know what I mean? It didn't have that label of you're the best. Do
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? It sounds awful, but at the same time, there was a number of them from a college in Scotland that have went to do exactly what I was going to try and achieve from London, West End, cruise ships, and most of the cruise ships are West End quality shows now and stuff as well. So they
Yeah.
went on to evolve. So I graduated. It was difficult, but I graduated. The empathy of my learning ability in dance college was actually zero. You know what I mean? It was kind of, well, you're your own worst enemy. You create these problems for yourself. Your level of academic ability is based on just you being your own worst enemy. You're creating these problems for yourself. You have to find a way to learn. You have to find a way to digest this information. Everyone finds it difficult. You are not alone. And what they didn't know was that I didn't know that at the time either, as ADHD and dyslexia, acute dyslexia. So,
well, I suppose
was,
in many aspects, my very limited view in it, my sister was part of dance academies for a number of years as well, but it's like, I don't want to say elitist, sounds like it's horrible, but they really do want, and there's an aspect to it which is admirable as well. They do want the best of the best of the best. And if you just have a physical or a psychological handicap or disadvantage, there's almost no apology for the fact that I'm not really interested. Do you know what I mean? If you've got an issue, you know what, that's your issue, because I've got thousands of people without that issue that want to achieve the very best. So I think it's a very historical thing to be part of. Would I be right in saying that? It's very traditional. It's very purist. The world of dance, and certainly ballet. When we get on speaking to Dan and stuff like that, it's very much that the purists still hold the strings. I think
there's one level, great, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
You're either great or average. You know what I mean? It's, I suppose, like anything. But I mean, the world's evolving, and you watch Paralympics, you watch the Invictus Games. These are now coming on par with the Olympics.
There are now opportunities for people that have those aspects to them. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds awful. I mean, God Almighty. I mean, we're not old, but we're not young, and we're talking about women's football as if it's some sort of no longer a novelty. Do you know what I mean? It sounds awful. Yeah. It's like I've been in the gym recently, just before we done the show, and I was listening to them saying, "Isn't it weird that we're talking about women's football as if it's like not a novelty anymore? It's kind of like it's actually all right, isn't it?" You talk to the guy in the locker, and you're like, "It's all right, this game, isn't it?" I mean, it's not to say that women are crap at football. It's just not a culture that we're used to. You're not used to a culture.
And you almost feel bad for saying that, because it was the case for a long time, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I suppose it's just trying to switch that mindset and not feel the pawn, the token character of that elite breed. But I graduated from college. That was a challenge, but I got it done. And after college, I just thought, you know what? I need to get out this place, this headspace. Trying to allow people to. It sounded often like I was talking about myself a lot, or wanting people to validate my effort, or wanting people to look at me as this individual of greatness. And it wasn't. What I was pleading for is for somebody to tell me the way in which you are is, and your low self-esteem has come from your ADHD.
Yeah.
Whereas I just thought it was, again, I was thick as fucking two short planks. And I thought, I'm going to try and go traveling. So I went online and I applied for I did a few fitness qualifications whilst I was ironically, just after college. So I'd done my exercise to music, and I'd done my gym instructor level 2, kind of the basic ones. And I got my aqua aerobics qualification because I knew that there would probably be a lot of poolside activities. Phoned this company called Mark Warner Holidays, which were kind of a sailing, fitness, outdoor holiday retreat type thing. So I got a call back, come for an interview, went down to London. I'd never taught an aerobics class in my life. I'd never taught aqua aerobics class in my life, never done a gym session in my life, but I had the qualifications. Anyway, me being me, I was able to sell shite on a plate, and I sold myself, and that was one good quality. I could sell. I'd told them that I'd worked with all these high caliber clubs. Oh, absolutely fucking done this for years. Convinced myself I'd done it for years, and I got the job in Greece in this hotel, and I was showing my mum these pictures. Mum, look, I'm going to the San Agostino Beach Club holiday resort, and I was looking at, bloody hell, that's fucking fancy. How you get that job? I was like, well, I've told them that I'm a swim instructor, aqua aerobics instructor, gym instructor of 10 years. And she's like, Grant, you're 21, you've been teaching since 11. I was like, well, basically, I think I have. So got in, and I remember stepping on that aerobics mat, and I'd done my usual, just won it, faked it till I made it. And the big confidence booster that I got from that season, having taught in Greece for 6 months from April to November, was that I won Staff Member of the Month for 6 months on the trot. Yeah. This little jock who, came from absolutely nothing really compared to these individuals who were all public school chappies and chapetties that were on their gap year from and that was a culture shock, but I fitted in, you know what I mean? Yeah, but ironically, being this token jock, they seem to want me. They seem to love it. And
well, mate, I think what you've got in abundance, just to jump in there, is that I find that people that do a lot of time in academics, and often you have it with private school children, stuff, or even people that go on to university degrees, they can lose a sense of commonality. They can lose a sense of ability to build rapport. They can lose their ability to hold a conversation and be engaging and be gregarious, because they've spent so much time in isolation on self-study. They lose that they just lose that ability, and you've got that in boatloads. You know what I mean? You're very tactile and engaging, and you're very magnetic. So I imagine they was like flies to a shit when they were coming around you.
Yeah, it worked. And the one thing that I learned from kind of that season is I remember things were beginning to click into place, that there was something maybe a little bit off on with my personality. It was my Greek manager, the second season in Greece. So I went from Greece, then I went to France in the Alps. I'd never skied, didn't have a clue how to pronounce salopettes. I didn't even know what salopettes were until I found out they were fancy trousers for ski. I thought they were just waterproof.
You remind me, it was like one of those Catherine Tate skits where it's like, hey, can you ski? Yeah, of course I can. So I can hey, can you ride a horse? Yeah, of course I can.
Yeah, give it a go. 4 miles down the road on a horse backwards, but I'll give it a go. And I remember my manager saying, Grant, do you know when you're good, and when you're shit, you're shit? I thought, that sounds like the shop owner down the road when I used to go down to the shop for rolls. You're all or nothing. And then that reminds me of my school teacher saying to me, you're like a wild horse needing tamed. I thought, I mean, it's all about kind of black and white, isn't it? But I remember it being always that it didn't, I remember them saying, it doesn't matter how talented you are as a practitioner of your art of fitness or dance or sailing or scuba diving. It's the public relations. That's what ticks boxes.
Yeah.
As long as you're good at what you do, you don't need to be. That was completely opposite to what I'd heard. You don't need to be great, because the reality of it is the public will buy you.
People buy from people.
That's exactly it, and that's where I thought.
And it's consistency as well, like you say. You can either, if you're great or you're shit, it's very difficult to build relationships, because people want consistency. Even if they'd rather have you're a consistent 7 than like some days you're a 9, some days you're a 2. Do you know what I mean? And because that's sustainable, people can build relationships upon that. And because you're absolutely right, people buy from people. They won't buy because they think you're the best or they think you're the whatever. It's about, can they make a connection with you? And if some days you're turning up and you're just, your motivation or your engagement or your empathy is just through the floor, then it's very, very it's just very difficult for people, isn't it? It's very up and down. It's just very volatile.
Yeah.
That must have been so hard for you, though, because you'd obviously started to get an awareness for it. And I almost want to emphasize what you said before about feeling like you were dumb, but not, because it's almost like, I think people that are sincerely poorly educated or have a very low IQ aren't necessarily as aware of the fact that they have a very low IQ. That is just their reality. And they will struggle a bit with life, but they're almost content with it. And that's okay. And they find their place in society. And we need people like that, because it helps us all. Someone needs to, deliver the mail. Someone needs to stack the shelves at Tesco's, and that's wonderful. I'm not saying everybody that stacks the shelves in Tesco's has got low IQ, but, it's important that we have those people. But people that, it's almost like you're looking through a window and you're like, the window says stupid on it, but I don't feel like I'm stupid. And you almost have an awareness of the fact that, like, I feel like I'm looking through something that's not making sense. It's not like I'm in it and I can't make sense of it. You're like, this isn't me, but there's something between me and reality. Does that make, that's what I'm hearing.
You've hit it on the nail, and it goes with such extremes as well, because you feast on that feeling of adrenaline. And for me, for a long time, it was the engagement and the validation of how good I was at my job on seasons, staff member of the month. So that was a really positive thing to be addicted to. But at the same time, there was a culture on seasons of drinking and other social activities that went on. And at the same time, I wanted to be at the top of that.
Yeah.
And I would extreme drink, extreme train, extreme public relations. And what I didn't realise is what chronic burnout was.
Yeah.
So I would literally, if there was a bottle of vodka or a bottle of gin, or there was a party that was going to go on for a day that could go on for 2 days because I had 2 days off, I would accept that as a challenge, and I would go to extremes on seasons to endeavour to be that level of a drinker, or that level of a 2-day partier, or if the next again day they were going a 10k run on the hangover from 9 bottles of fucking ouzo over 2 days, I'm going 20k. And that's when the Greek manager would say, Grant, see, when you're good, you're good. When you're shit, you're shit. So none of us are interested in how, from a manager perspective, how much you can drink.
Yeah.
That's what you do in your off time. What we want to know is how good you are as a performer on a work. Now, what we've seen is for months and months and months and months, you perform at such a high level of public relations. That's dipped for some reason. What's going on here? And I would say to them, it's I don't know, and I'd get panicked and flustered. And that's when that angry Grant came in.
Yeah,
it's
you
your
feel
fault,
defensive,
manager.
you feel attacked.
Your finger pointing me as being a bad person. And what they were right. I'd gone from public relations pioneer to a bloody Ozzy Osbourne drinker. You know what I mean? I was absolutely boozing it. So I was addicted to both.
Mm.
And again, that's
why
when
was
I
that
felt
though? Was it just wanting to
certain...
be part of the team, wanting to be part of the gang, wanting to appear the most interesting, the most engaging, the most I'm up for anything? What was that?
Due to my low, you know what, looking back, due to my low self-esteem from school, dancing, having to try and work as hard as I could, and then them were saying, Grant, you're pretty shit, and then, all right, you're okay. A lot of people, I felt like a god. I felt like a god when I was on seasons. And people used to come to me if it was for the extreme party. They would come to me if they wanted a chat. They would come to me for knowledge on how to kind of work the public, So that level of exposure of people being grateful for me being there.
Well, you're living in a playground as well, aren't you? Because the paying customers are coming there for a very short period of time. They're there for a week or they're there for a weekend, and they want to have a great time. So you're bouncing on that high all the time. You're going from peak to peak to peak to peak to peak. But that's, like you said, that's just not sustainable. You're like setting yourself on fire just to keep everybody else warm. And
it's short-lived, 2 weeks. I'm only having to convince them for 2 weeks because then the next bus load's coming in.
Yeah.
So they're now on a fresh slate. It's like, hey, I'm Grant. 2 weeks later, I'm running out of energy with you. You're buying into it. Maybe I'm going to start losing that momentum. Right, you fuck off back to London or Liverpool or Glasgow or wherever you're going. Right, next shed load. And you come. I'm back. Grant.
You almost get trained in only developing short-term relationships. And I don't mean like physical or intimate ones, although maybe that's the case for some people that work in that sector. But certainly like just relationships with people in general were probably quite superficial at that period of life.
Yeah, and that does happen in relationships with individuals like myself with ADHD, is a lot of people think that they're into a person or into a product. And what happens is that feeling of adrenaline, dopamine high, is short-lived, because that's exactly what it is. I'm excited about seeing you. I'm excited in this moment. This is how it's going to be. This must be how it feels all the time.
And then what happens is there's a squirrel outside, and I'm like, yeah. And then that person over there, like, Grant, you're not giving me your attention now. I'm like, yeah, no, I'll be there. There's another giraffe going past, or there's a tree. Grant, can you give? Yeah, I'll be there. Well, no, Grant, you gave me that attention. What's happened? Grant's changed. No, it hasn't. I'm still me.
Yeah.
Oh, am I acting like that? So that's why it was good, that 2 week turnover of guests, because it would just be, yeah, you guys are now beginning to bore me now. You know, my level of enthusiasm with you as a group of people, or that my enthusiasm with you as an individual intimately is now boring me. Not that you are boring, it's just stimulus that I got to start with is now no longer there. So it sounds like you're shit, and it looks like you're just no longer attractive or interesting or stimulating my need for dopamine. Off you go, off you fuck, and now I'm going to find something else. It's not that I wanted to find somebody else, I just needed to find something that created that adrenaline burst, which makes you look like a selfish prick.
So how long into these seasons did you get that self-awareness that, or would you have kept continuing to do this? Because you work in a different profession now. What made you want to stop doing that? What was the trigger that made you think this isn't sustainable for me, or I don't enjoy this, or it's just not where my head's at anymore?
I was beginning to, in between seasons, every 2 weeks, two weeks a year, I would kind of come back home, hit the tarmac, and it was becoming a culture of self-destruction. You know, people were only seeing me drunk, or seeing me train, or seeing me drunken train, or people were saying, Grant, what's your future holding? You know what I mean? You've had a good kick at the ball at this. You've done it from 21 to nearly 29. You know,
wow.
Nearly 9 years. And then I got back to Scotland, and I thought, right, I'm going to try and figure this out in Scotland. I want to finish my final season in Scotland. And there was a little caravan park down the east coast of Scotland called Dunbar, and I lived in a caravan for 2 years up until where I was nearly 30. And I remember kind of seeing more of my mum and dad and more of my family, and they're like, right, well, Andrew's settled into the job, my twin brother with the Procurator Fiscal, all my friends have settled into jobs, and, you know, they've got their life done. You're still kind of a bit free and not really settled down. And these things kind of started entering my head. You know, I needed a platform of foundation to be able to maybe continue that, but there was a level of safety to come back to. I didn't have that, and also I didn't have a house. You know, so I was kind of going back to my mum and dad's for a fortnight.
So did you think you needed this, or did you think other people expected you? Because there's a balance there somewhere in the middle. I'm not saying that we should all just fuck about all of our lives, but there's a balance. I always say one of the biggest regrets, I think it's from a study, I forget what book it was as well, where they're like, the biggest regrets of the dying is that they wished they had done more of the things that they wanted to do, not the things they thought other people wanted them to do. And some people live a life of expectation where they think they should. Well, I'm supposed to find a partner, I'm supposed to settle down, I'm supposed to get a house, I'm supposed to get married. And so some people that does equal happiness, but for some people that's just the way they'd been indoctrinated into it. So you were kind of at that crossroads there where you felt some sort of, you wanted that independence. And obviously nobody wants to be going back to their folks' place when they're 29 or whatever, but where was that crossroads confronting you?
I think it was, basically I was in between evolving into stereotypical adulthood of let's all settle down, buy a house, have babies. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot think of anything worse. But, you know, I've had a good kick at the ball. I've caused an enormous amount of naughty dramas throughout my seasons, and got myself in a lot of few funny predicaments that, you know, if the average grown-up adult 28, 29 wouldn't get themselves in. And I thought, you know what? Maybe mum and dad are right. Maybe everyone around me is right. I don't want to give up this lifestyle because it suits me. You know, nobody knows me any longer than 6 months, which suited me. You know, I didn't really have to form a relationship with anyone for any longer than 6 months. But do you know what? I suppose it's kind of time to kind of knuckle down. So I got myself into 1 day a week on my day off when I was working at the caravan park. I used to travel back up to Edinburgh and do a water fitness class. And I met this young lady called Hayley. And now that's my partner now, Hayley. And she just took me, well, ironically, she thought I was a prick during my interview because I just told her, she told her manager, in fact,
she's a good judge of character.
She's a fucking good judge of character. But yeah, the aquarobic instructor's clearly good at what he does, but he's a fucking gobshite and a prick. But we're desperate, so let's take him on. So the gobshite prick aqua aerobics instructor got taken on to work at a local club called Drumshoe Bath Clubs, which was quite, in fact, not quite posh members club. It was a very networky, gentlemanly swimming baths where very high academics, very
in the cat
high
amongst the pigeons,
achievers,
then.
lawyers. Yeah, this little gobshite went, and I refused to take my baseball cap off when I went in. I says, well, it's me or nobody. The reality of it is, kind of up the workers, fucking come on, fucking Scotland. I was like, I walked in, hiya, my name's Grant. I'm not taking my baseball cap off because sweat goes in my eyes. If you don't like me for who I am, fuck off. And I didn't say that, but in a nutshell, and I trying to be post-voice, I says, fuck off and get somebody else. Because no one else is going to work for 20 quid an hour when you guys are earning 100k plus a year. You know, I'm basically a Downton Abbey donkey for you lot.
Yeah,
fucking dancing Shanghai by the Bay City Roamers and ABBA at poolside. But if that gives you a sense of satisfaction, I'll work. But it's going to be for 30 quid an hour. I'm giving you charity, you rich bastards. For me to keep my baseball cap on. So anyway, after that, me and Hayley never really spoke. I was still going down to the caravan park 6 days a week would come up. And then me and Hayley created this relationship. I asked her out on a date, and we kind of discovered that there was a number of kind of personality similarities. You know, she doesn't have ADHD, but she just liked to be spontaneous. She enjoyed a kind of a free kind of hippie lifestyle, and she used to come down to the caravan every weekend and live with me. And she adopted that lifestyle with me. She loved it. She embraced it. She felt part of something big. She felt part of a community that idolized her. You know. Maybe that came from maybe a little bit of low self-esteem from her, but you felt appreciated, you felt valued when you were at the caravan park because you were the person or the individuals, now Hayley involved, that created an atmosphere and created that escape from their 9 to 5 shit. You know, you were their escape. So you were you were really valued, and that evolved. We were going to move into the caravan full time and both worked down in the caravan park until I had an argument with what you guys down in England had. It was a groundskeeper. He was like groundskeeper Willie from The Simpsons. He was an absolute psychopath. Wasn't allowed to use a chainsaw because he was a fucking nut job. There were certain tasks that this groundskeeper was allowed to do, and there were certain tasks that he wasn't allowed to do. We found out he had schizophrenia. Which,
God,
with a chainsaw.
Nothing worse than a guy with chemicals and sharp objects. He's got his own fucking shed and he's 150 years old, just a crazy bastard.
yeah, confronted with a guy with ADHD that was telling him he was going to knock his fucking pan in.
It's like some sort of Mad Max scenario.
Yeah. It looked like two bong-eyed fucking psychos shouting at each other. So anyway, I got asked to take a chance on changing my attitude towards the staff, which in my opinion it wasn't me. It was their culture. You know, I was trying to evolve the caravan park, create this kind of European club atmosphere. They were what to play the standard bingo on a Friday night because they had their culture. So anyway, I evolved and I buggered off basically with Hayley. We came through during the night. We hired a van during the night. We packed the van. The day before the summer holidays started in Scotland, they required me. They needed me, they needed Hayley, and it was a kind of, we're going to start a revolution by the Beatles was blasting from the van that we'd hired. We just fucking fired up the volume. We're going to start a revolution 2 in the morning. Fuck yes, guess what? Your entertainer's gone, and it's now started the summer. So I took power from that. I took engagement from that, and I'm fucking waving wanker fucking signals out to the security on and I felt such a fucking great guy. Like, hey, stick it up your arse. I'm gone. You guys have no entertainers. Summer starts tomorrow. Forgetting all the punters that were going to be affected, but I got that dopamine rush. Whee!
Where did you think you were going then? What was the plan?
I didn't. Well, we kind of had a friend that allowed us to have a flat for a month till we got ourselves on our feet. But that was a kick up the arse we needed. You know, it was I was out of work. Hayley was working. Rent was getting on top of us, and you know, me and Hayley had to make that decision of what we were going to do. I finally got. Well, ironically, I didn't get a lot of work. I was running 12 miles because I didn't drive, or I don't drive. I've got my provisional now, but I was running like 12 miles to like a centre to do 3-4 classes back to back to then run 12 miles back.
Fucking hell.
To this flat that we were that we were using. So, but it wasn't cost efficient. So then we moved into my mum and dad's for a year. And when you're living at your mum and dad's, you know what I mean, they can see through your bullshit. And, you know, it was like their house, their rules, which was difficult, but it gave us time to kind of save up enough to try and put a kind of mortgage down or a deposit down on a house. You know, living 2 years in a caravan park, then a year with my mum and dad, you know, it was enough to kind of begin to think, right, well, hold on, my life doesn't have to completely change.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's a lot of drama, but I need to, if I'm going to cause a lot of trauma, it needs to be in my house or mine and Haley's house or flat or whatever we're going to get.
Yeah.
So that year gave us enough time to kind of try and get enough money to put a deposit down and get me a little bit more stable work. So I built up my fitness business and got up to maybe 25 classes a week, which was enough to kind of sustain a self-employed income. Got the house, or got the flat, and life began to change after that. You know, there was a number of things that happened. Unfortunately, mum passed away and things like that, but it began to change. You know, there was a level of responsibility, and there was a level of, I mean, leaving that party, high intensity lifestyle seasons and caravan parks to now moving into centres that require a level of etiquette. You know, David Lloyd's, Ballantyne's Health, Edinburgh University. You know, they weren't going to accept that season-air culture or season-air rules. You know, there was
a bit too fast and loose.
Our rules. Yeah. So I kind of had to figure out, you know, quickly a level of respect for the club, but also take that experience of public relations and I done quite well. In fact, I didn't do quite well. I done really well. So yeah, that kind of took me up to probably about a year or 2 years out of seasons, kind of building that business up. Yeah.
So
strange chapter.
How soon after that did you then begin taking your medication and start having that diagnosis? Because we'll be up to your 30s by then, I'd imagine.
That's correct. It must have been about 31, 33. Must have been about.
And was it Haley that encouraged you to do
years.
that, or?
No, it was my mother actually. Before she passed away, my mother passed away when I was 31, probably 2016, and she went, "Grant, this isn't you. I've been reading on ADHD," and I was like, "What's ADHD? Is that not a rock band?" She was, "No." She was, "That's AC/DC." I was like, "Oh yeah,
close enough."
And I was like, "Right, close enough." So that's fucking dyslexic. No, I was like, "Right, okay." So ADHD. So I'd done a bit of reading on it, and I was like, "Right, I'm gonna have to check this up." Now I'd kind of taken a breakdown, ended up in the cells for 2 nights, suicide suit, went to the doctors. I was diagnosed with anxiety, and they were like, ADHD is going to be a really, really complicated one to get diagnosed because you're 35.
What had led to you having a breakdown? Sorry.
My cousin Lee committed suicide, and I was really close to him, and he was the individual that kind of inspired me to be this charismatic fitness instructor.
How did he take his life?
He hung himself. He had three suicide attempts. He overdosed on tablets, drove his car into a tree, and then the third one, that was kind of the piece de resistance. That was the one that unfortunately he took his life. But I got a call that night from his partner. Listen, Lee's playing up, saying that if I don't do X, Y, and this is to his partner. His partner phoned me saying Lee's drunk, extremely drunk. He's threatening to take his life. I went, listen, it's Cry Wolf. I've heard it before. Now, I wasn't aware that the tablets was an overdose. I thought it was sepsis. I was told it was sepsis. Okay. That's why he'd got a blood. This is what he told us. I thought the car crash was a legitimate accident, but I was aware that his mental health was fractured. He would often cry in front of me. I says, well, I think it's a cry for help. There's no way he's going to take his life. But I hadn't realised these two times that he was nearly on death's door were suicide attempts. So I suggested, listen, give it a few hours, let's see what happens. And within that few hours, he'd taken himself down to a local park, took a dog lead, tied it to a tree, smoked himself into the ground, drank 2 bottles of wine and hung himself. Got a call probably about not long after in the morning saying, Grant, he's done it. And I went, done what? He went, he's hung himself. I went, Lee? I went, yep, he's hung himself. So obviously I thought, fuck, I should have taken that into accountability. You know, that's on me now. You know, I should have read the signals. I should have asked for help. At the time, I just thought it was a crime.
You're not the only person in his sphere. You're not the only person in his world, mate. You know, You can't
Yeah.
put that on
So I
yourself.
blamed myself for that for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did for a long time. And I remember walking down, it was a place called Broxburn High Street, me and Haley skipping along, skipping along, kind of hand in hand along the street. And then next minute, I don't know what happened. It was like I fucking lost it. And Haley's trying to console me and cuddle me. And I remember kind of pushing her away, give me space, give me space. She tripped up. And there was a witness to suggest that I'd hit her and pushed her onto
Oh,
the floor.
mate.
And it was me just freaking out. Police arrived, cuffed me, put me in the meat wagon, took me down to the cells, and I kind of tried to explain my side of the story. And I was then asked to take all my clothes off, and I was put in a more or less a jumpsuit for 2 days in a cell. And I remember being in they call it kind of like the dog pen or the dog cage just before you head up to court. And very fortunately, I got this Grant Flynn, and I thought that was me heading up to the court. And it was one of these G4S security guards says, "Can you sign this bit of paper?" Signed it and went, "That's you free." And I went, "Hey?" Went, "You've got a diversion plan." And I went, "Right, what's a diversion plan?" They're like, "You aren't going to court, but you're going to have to meet with the Procurator Fiscal once every 3 months for an education in anger management, domestic abuse, and alcohol abuse." And
Fuck.
at that point, I thought, I'm not a domestic abuser.
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
not got anger management problems. I'm frustrated, but I wouldn't say I'm angry at an individual. I'm angry within myself because I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I've got this
I've allowed
ADHD,
myself
I
to
don't
be
know it.
labelled as
I've got
this
this
thing that
fucking
is not who I am.
yeah, and I was deemed as a threat to myself and a threat to others, and had to every 3 months go to the Procurator Fiscal, and then it was brushed over. So Mum says, "Right, we're going to the doctor." So the doctor says, "Listen, I think you've got anxiety, general anxiety kind of disorder type thing." I was put on citalopram. That kind of, it was again drawn that wild horse in a bit. It made me think a bit more rationally, but there was still that misunderstanding of why I found things quite overwhelming. You know, growing into an adult, not having your washing done on seasons, not having to pay your bills. Everything on seasons was done for me. You know, it's a bit like being in the army. A lot of these things are done for you, you know, and then
Yeah.
you're chucked into Civvy Street. And I had to do all these things. But, you know, my anxiety had dropped a little, but I was still anxious about certain tasks. And I just thought it was because I was a selfish prick. I was still trying to get over the thought of my cousin Lee taking his life. And then 2016, my mother was diagnosed with, no, in fact, she went to New York. She came back half the woman she was. She came back with pneumonia pleurisy.
Bloody hell.
She was then taken, I don't know how she travelled, it was taken into hospital. She would then say to the doctor, "I'm feeling a bit odd. I think you've put too much medicine in me." To which they were saying, "Can you describe the symptoms?" She then had a stroke. So she's in hospital with pneumonia pleurisy and having had a stroke. She then was released from hospital and the life changed, you know. It was like, right, now mum's my priority. This selfish bastard, me, who'd caused all these problems, you know, this is the image, had to change. My mum was the priority, you know. To then what I got, I know, in fact, it was like almost like COVID. Things were weird. It was like I was rather than just use a scoop for the dog food, I'd just fucking chuck my hands in the dry dog food, throw it in, and then wash my hands. My mum was looking at me in certain ways. I'd maybe scratch my nose. And my mum would say, "Right, we'll go and wash your hands, you clerk." This is not something that my mum was into. She's like, "Grant, you dirty git. Stop bloody picking your nose, or stop scratching your arse, you pig, or stop scratching your nuts and go and wash your hands." Or make sure that it was all these things became a real paramount priority of hygiene. And this is before COVID.
Yeah.
So that was fucking weird. I mean, my mum's you know, a very clean, house proud woman, but this is becoming OCD. And I thought maybe it was a fucking stroke or something. I thought it made people want to clean more. I don't know. I didn't know what the symptoms of strokes were, but I thought it was maybe like a neurological thing.
Yeah.
And then my mum says, "No, I've got a blood disorder." A blood disorder? I went, "All right, what sort of blood disorder?" And my brother then messaged me a couple of weeks later saying, "We're going to beat this bastard cancer." And I went, "All right, who's got cancer?" And he went, "Mum." I went, "Well, I didn't know that." So then I thought, why are you telling Andrew she's got cancer and not telling me? But I thought, right, hold on a minute. It's not about me, it's about mum. So she ended up being diagnosed with myeloma, which is a blood cancer. And then 2 years so she probably about 2000. She's had this for a long time. We didn't know this. The pneumonia pleurisy is all part of the cancer. The stroke was part of the cancer. It was her body beginning to shut down. 2 years later, she died. But within that 2 years, she told me, let's get you checked for ADHD. Now, after that, mum passed away. Now my head is fucked. I went to the doctors and I says, listen, I want checked for ADHD. And it was my mother's doctor, who was a beautiful woman, Dr. Bailey. Says, right, give me examples of what you think makes you have ADHD. And I says, right, what I think makes me have ADHD is if I'm going to run an ultra marathon, I'm going to run an ultra marathon. She went, well, anyone can say that. No, I'm running an ultra marathon tomorrow. She went, what, on no training? I went, fucking, that's exactly what's happening. Right. She goes, and how many have you done of them? I says, well, I've done 4 marathons. I've done 1 mountain marathon and I've done an ultra marathon on no training. I'm not suggesting it was a godlike time, but I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done the Jacob's Ladder for 7 hours and climbed Mount Everest on the fucking Jacob's Ladder. Yeah. 7.5 hours not coming off it, willing to piss myself if that's what it took. So there was a number of tasks that were complete. Also unable to read. It wasn't I was unable to read. I just couldn't concentrate on reading. Went into academics, went into certain bits of my youth, certain obsessions, addictions, drinking. It wasn't I was a drunk. It wasn't I was an alcoholic. I had this addiction of, if I'm getting drunk, I'm getting fucking paralytic. And I'm getting paralytic for 2 days, and that's what's happening. So this went on. She went, right, I'm going to ask you to tick this. I called it the who the fuck am I sheet. Do you wash? Do you feel this? Do you fucking feel this? Do you do this? Do you do that? Ticked them. She went, right, is that a really honest interpretation? I went, well, you question my integrity. She went, no, I'm just asking. I went, right, well, I've had a fucking enough of asking. That's how it is. I didn't swear, but I've had enough of people asking. They put it in a pigeonhole. It was then forgot. It was they lost it. They lost it. A year later, I was still waiting for this to be submitted. I went, is there any update on my ADHD? They lost it. So Dr. Bailey spoke to reception. It was discovered that it was lost. I'd done another who the fuck am I check sheet. Handed that in. A year later, is there any update on this? 2020, just before lockdown. 2019. Has it been handed in? Oh, it's actually forgot to be submitted. I filled in another who the fuck am I check sheet. Ironically, must have been March 2021. I got a call from a psychologist saying, hi Grant, it's Dr. whoever from the Inchkeith House Mental Health Department. We're led to believe that you think you've got ADHD. I took a 1.5 hour phone call. You've got ADHD. And you're high, you've got high, I don't know what it is, like you're high on the spectrum. You're epileptic. Yeah, you're high on the spectrum. You're epileptic, which is a neurological problem. You're dyslexic, which is a neurological problem. You have epilepsy in the family. Did you mention you've got autism in your family? Yeah. Okay, it's highly genetic. I don't know how this has not been discovered. I was like, right, so what do? He went, well, there's options. We can give you tablets, which increases your dopamine level, which will make you feel more kind of centered and a bit more kind of, it was actually Scott that said it to me, Scott from the show. I didn't realize he had ADHD. And it was him that described the tablets to me. You kind of feel more there. You feel down the middle. So most people, these tablets at speed would make them feel high as fuck. Me, it just kind of brings me back to a more calm state. I don't require that stimulus. So they offered me those tablets. I took them. Or that's it. You know, there's not really help out there. You know, we don't have a set ADHD therapy. There's a little chat group. Hi, I'm Grant. I've got ADHD. Do you have ADHD? We can all talk about ADHD, but there's not an actual structured help service. So it's tablets. We can all talk about have ADHD, but there's not an actual. It's good. How do you feel? And I was like, well, at the time, it's great. Mum was right. I've got ADHD. This is why I am. But how do I better myself? There's nothing out there. So that's been a challenge, you know what I mean? But I've done a lot of self-reading and or kind of not really reading, watching lots of YouTube professionals.
No, yeah. I mean, to go through those tests and to have that, it just shows immense self-awareness. And I almost wanted to just jump back to your mum's passing for a minute, because it's so often the case that we'll always do more for someone else than we'll do for ourselves, you know, and experiencing Lee take his own life and the need to make a change then, and then your mom passing as well. Just kind of, it's almost like this growing energy of, I need to make a change. These people around me who have tried and they've sacrificed a lot to try and help me improve my life, and now it's all down to you, and you've kind of taken that on and really gone with it. It'd have been so easy for lots of other people to just go, "Oh no, fuck it. Look at what I've been through. Life's a failure," and God forbid, maybe taking a similar path to Lee, really.
Yeah, and it could have gone that way. It could have gone that way. So in retrospect, yeah, you're right. It's good enough. It was good that I was brave enough to take that leap of my mother's judgment.
Man, that's colossal.
But it was also
huge.
Good for, yeah, and it was great that my mother still had empathy, and knowing that this wasn't me from birth till probably about 11-year-old.
And also your partner, Hayley's. You guys obviously made it through that. I can't imagine that was easy.
No, it wasn't easy. It was not easy. And that's now something that we're both working on. That's something that we've done a lot to try and help others, rather than ourselves. And a vast amount of our relationship has been helping others. Necessarily quite often, like my neighbour Mary that we kind of spoke about, my elderly neighbour Mary who's got additional needs, my mum, Hayley having to take the brunt of how I felt about my cousin Lee's death. So it did affect Hayley. So how it affected me emotionally affected Hayley. How Hayley saw it affect me emotionally affected her. How we had to want to, we didn't have to, we did want to help other people, for example, through that whole brunt of lockdown. It plays a detrimental part on your relationship. It plays a massive effect on how much time you spend with each other. So good on her for standing by me.
She's a good woman, man.
She's a strong character.
So where was your mindset coming into this challenge? Because this is quite an overwhelming thing to participate in, having already come through that.
Yeah, burnt out. I was burnt out. I was actually a ball hair from not nearly doing this show because of lockdown. To kind of dice the fat through lockdown, like many individuals, your responsibility was to kind of try and look after each other as well as yourself. So Mrs. Knights, at the time I was living in a tenement flat, Mrs. Knights up the stairs from us had motor neurons disease. She was at the end of life with her daughter who was isolated with her. My neighbour Mary, who is a 75-year-old elderly woman with additional learning needs, with no family looking after her. She had breast cancer, esophagus cancer, all these hospitals. So imagine all the errands that you would run for your parents willingly to do to make sure that or anyone, that needs running errands as a volunteer carer for anyone. We did that for Mary. We helped Davina with her mother. My cousin Lee, who committed suicide, his daughter, I found her. She was homeless. So there's a famous family in Scotland, a character family called the Bruins. And the Bruins is like Ma Broon, Pa Broon, Bairn Broon. It's this big family. In fact, the best way to do it is, do you know the Jim Royal, the Royal Family?
Oh, yeah.
That TV programme, that comedy. It was like them, like Granny and Grandad and the kid are all sleeping in the bed and they're all living in this one council house. That was what lockdown was like. And to the latter end of it, our mental health by the end of it was burst. Done. Fucked. Hayley ended up moving to Newcastle. My training for this TV show, I was sleeping on a mattress in Mary's house in Edinburgh to make sure services were in place for me and Hayley to move to Newcastle. The reason we couldn't take Mary down to Newcastle was because Mary was diagnosed with esophagus cancer. So for 3 months, Hayley's been living with her mum and dad prior to this show. I've been sleeping on a mattress, caring for an elderly woman, whilst working as a bin man, whilst trying to train. And
fucking hell.
I got to a point where I says, Hayley, I'm fucked. And she went, you're doing this. She goes, we're both fucked and you're doing it. If there's anyone that can do it, it's you. She went, remember, she goes, I mean this with a term of endearment. She goes, you're a fucking nutcase. You're going to do it. So take that fucking level of obscurity in your brain and use it to your advantage. You've got ADHD.
And that's a hell of an advantage.
Not
like it was any easier for you than anybody else, but Jesus Christ,
I was burnt out. So I'd hit chronic burnout by the time I'd entered that TV show. And trying to fucking lie to the psychologist. Is everything all right? I was like, yeah, fucking great. I'm all right. I'm wired on fucking speed to Cherta and 19 coffees, but yeah, life's good. Mary's good. Dogs are good. Mrs. Knight's passed away. Everyone's fine. She's at peace. The fucking dad's all right. Andrew's all right. Haley's fucking all right. The mattress is fucking all right to sleep on. Everyone's great. Everyone's amazing. She goes, well, you look all right, Grant. You look comfortable. I was like, good. That's the answer I want. You sure you want to do this TV show? Fucking yeah, I do. But
Jesus.
in retrospect to that, it was like a holiday camp for me. In the sense of,
yeah, I mean, so people won't know,
horrible.
when we first got there, we kind of had we had to go sort of COVID isolation or whatever it was called. So we did have kind of a nearly a week by ourselves, locked in a room, getting fed and watered and stuff. But that for many people, you know, speaking to the rest of the gang and stuff, was a real time of contemplation. And what was that time like for you?
Pretty, to start with, it was nice. I kind of embraced it. I was like, this is just lovely. You know, let's not sugarcoat it. It was a beautiful fucking room. You know, we got twice a day out to do a little bit of fizz, which was just enough to take the anxiety off cabin fever. You know, you're stuck in this room. But I've got to admit, latterly, towards the end of it, I was beginning to be like a cat on a hot tin roof, which I think all of us, I mean, that's no exception to anyone with ADHD. When you're high performance individuals like us, you know, that require that stimulus and that need for pushing your body, pushing your mind. That's not an exception for anyone with ADHD. That's how we all operate. So I think towards the latter end of it, I was beginning to just want. I was like a rocket with, you know, that ignition, that kind of lighter up my arse about to go. And as soon as that lighter flicked on that rocket, I was ready to just fucking hit it 100 miles. So I needed that, you know, I needed that exposure to I call it the Hurt Locker. You know, I just wanted that. That
How did you find the first sort of outing? Because we got sort of hooded up, didn't we? And then we went to the boats, didn't we? And we did that first sort of bit. Fucking beautiful, that natural park, and you know, seeing the mountains and all that sort of stuff. How were the first few days for you?
First few days were exciting, but also it was that period of where you're trying to settle into something that you might be thrown out of. So for me, it was that uncertainty, you know, that boat trip, something might have happened, you know. So it was beautiful. And I was trying to engage with all the stimulus, the colours, the people with the lampshades on their heads, these amazing cultural hats that they had. I'm completely amazed at these women carrying these athletes in boats across this massive lake to then turning around the corner and seeing these stud muffin special forces guys above us. It was almost like cinematic, wasn't it?
It was, mate. Like, when we came around that corner and they're up there in the temple area, that was a good start. That'll look good.
Pimples.
Yeah.
I got goose pimples. I was like, I'm ready to go.
Fucking
get me off this
time.
bit. And then Josh.
Yeah.
And then Josh started drowning. I was like, fuck's sake. So I remember turning back and grabbing Josh, and I was like, right, team player, don't moan. So kind of done my shitty lifeguarding, trying to pull Josh in. Josh gave me a big cuddle. We got off the boat. Well, mind when we jumped off the boat and then we swam, and then we got to the edge, and then I remember it was right. We had to run up these stairs, and it was, how many stairs was there? And I think you and Ross got it right, and I was like, I don't give a shit how many stairs there is. There's a lot of stairs, and then we got to the top of that temple and we met them, and that was weird. I was like, I know who you guys are, but I don't know who you guys are.
Yeah.
But you guys look a lot bigger than on TV, and you've actually come across your charisma, your stage presence, your just your physical being is pretty intimidating. You know,
cool,
and it wasn't
they were
intimidating.
fucking switched on. They were charged. It was good. I thought that first bit was all kind of weird because I kind of anticipated we would get changed into our stuff like kind of straight away, and we actually did quite a lot of stuff just in your civvies, didn't we? We were like crawling up and down the steps and fucking press ups and bunny hops and went through the rivers and we did quite a lot of shit on that first day.
They I think it was, I think what the term is in the military is, probably the blue light services as well, It's when you're being institutionalized into that manner of life as short, sharp shock. You know, it's a short ass kicking, it's a sharp ass kicking, and it's a shock to the system. And it's, do you fucking want to be here? And remember, Charlie,
Yeah, it's
that
like
first
sensory overload,
20
isn't it?
minutes, she took a panic attack. She was hyperventilating. She was on the floor. She was what looked like taking a heart attack. That was a reality check. And that's exactly what they wanted. So I try to remain probably like yourself, Pete, a little rational in my thinking. Try to remain. This is a chapter. This is a paragraph in a chapter. It is what it is. You know, I don't need to be first. It doesn't matter whether I'm last or first, as long as I put that effort in.
And that's where I think you were much more disciplined in that respect. Because I said exactly the same to myself. You know, when I was a younger kid, you know, I was all about being the fastest, and I competed in national teams and broke some records and got gold medals and all this sort of bollocks. But I thought I had already passed out of that chapter of, you know, leave your ego behind. You don't need to be, and I was saying to myself all the time, you know, don't need to be at the front. You know, stay middle of the pack, be there at the end. But I did feel flashes of moments where I was unnecessarily being a bit too quick or doing a bit too much, and I'm, you know, even now I look back on it and I'm like, was that ego, or do I justify it in that sense? I was pushing myself, but there was a few moments, certainly on that first day, where I was just fucking churning it up, and I was like, I need just wind your fucking neck in a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, an example of that was when we done that horrific run up to I think it was a waterfall.
Yes.
You trapezed down the waterfall, and me and you were put against each other.
Yes.
And I very quickly ran down the hill, and then you very quickly kicked my ass going up the hill.
You went fast down that hill, mate. You took off. I was scared to death of falling over. So and it's the irony of how I went out. But the whole time I was like, look, I know I'm fit enough. I know I've got it mentally. Just don't get injured. So when you took off down that hill, I was like, you fucking go, Grant. It's all you, mate. You take off down that hill. Because I knew I'd got quad strength and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, I can drive up a fucking hill all day long. But I thought, shit, I'm not going to bother competing with Grant on this one, because you took off fast.
But then you kicked my ass up the hill, which was a big reality check.
Horses for course.
Because in retrospect to that, if I'm being completely honest with myself, I thought he was a big bugger. He's not going to beat me up this hill. And what and
I'd have been in the same. I'm in a weird old place with all, because I thought that, like, on day one, I thought, I'm going to look like that stereotypical dickhead, because people don't know, like, I used to be like 24 stone competing in international strongman, so I used to be significantly bigger than I am now. But even having lost like 6 stone, I'm still around 17 and a half, sort of 18 stone. But to me, that I'm a shadow of my former self. I'm a much thinner, fitter, lighter guy. But by comparison, I'm still probably a bit heavy. And I thought, it's just going to be that stereotype, the DS or the team or the crew or whatever. And we kind of fell into it on the first day, where people were saying, oh, big man or big Pete, and I kind of don't like that, in all honesty, because I don't like to just be no one did it maliciously, but to be stereotyped as just this physical thing, because I like to think there's far more to us, much the same as yourself. You've got such an eclectic and interesting background. You're more than just the physical things that you've been able to do. But I did find myself gravitating towards those physical strengths. How did you find living with 20 strangers? Because obviously we did day one, and then we were kind of we were in it then. We saw the base, and we saw the sandpit and the drill yard and the dorms, and that was it. We were kind of in it then, and we were able to speak for the first time, really.
Yeah, to be fair, it took me back to a nice place. It took me back to a really good place. My seasons, number of seasons we had to share accommodation. So I always engage better with a group than my own company. So for me, it was quite a relief to know that you're going back to a community. You're going back to a place of like-minded people. Yeah. More or less in respect of what we're all doing and sharing.
Oh, no, there were. It was a real safe space, I think.
Yeah. And there was a lot of compassion.
Some people really struggled with having to be ready all the time, though. They felt a lot of anxiety around not knowing what was next, and you seem to take it in your stride. I mean, I was speaking to Scott yesterday, and like he was saying, I never took my boots off because I wasn't sure when we needed to be ready. And Amelia especially, I know you spent some time, because you were right, you were down the bottom end near Amelia, weren't you? And she really struggled with that sense of control and not knowing what was happening and what was next and when we needed to go, when we needed to be ready for.
Yeah, I just kind of looked at it objectively. I just thought, right, the boots are the only thing that I'm having to put on. I mean, I wasn't taking my whole kit off. I was taking my boots off. But you're right, it was that uncertain feeling of recruits. And then us all panicking like rabbits in headlights to try and get our boots on. And, it was that's when you exposed the individuals at the time that were individual athletes or individual players, because there was team players, like I remember saying to Amelia, right, Amelia, is there anything that you need done? I've got my boots on, can I help? But at the same time, Amelia was very empathetic to me as well. She'd say, right, Grant, can I help? Can I do anything? But what I did observe is as soon as people had their boots on, there was a number of people just standing with their boots on. There wasn't people saying, right, I've got my boots on, can I help?
Yeah, you saw that in a few things.
I don't think it was done in malice.
I think some of it was conscious.
Done in malice to start with.
Some of it was conscious because some people were just that type of person. There wasn't many there. I'd say there's maybe only one or two who were sincerely maybe selfish people, and maybe we'll get onto that later on. But most people, I think, were actually fairly oblivious to it, because I think there's a couple of people in there that lived fairly singular lives outside of this, so they were kind of just used to, not for better or worse, they were just kind of used to looking after themselves. But yeah, you and Danica and Amelia and a few others had a great deal of empathy, and I think it comes from you having looked after and cared for people in your private life as well. You had a much greater awareness of the needs of the group and not just yourself.
Yeah, in retrospect to what you're saying, in retrospect to what I've gone through or chose to do rather than gone through, and I think it's just my upbringing as well. You know what I mean? My mother would always say, it's not just about you. Don't put your me t-shirt on. It's about everyone here. So, chip in or in, get in, help each other. So I think that just comes from my subconscious and my upbringing. You're right. But back in the day, I would have got really annoyed at those selfish players. I just see them as a bunch of selfish pricks that didn't want to help.
Yeah.
But with that little bit of life experience, there is that level of empathy. You could tell a lot of those that didn't look like team players were just frantically in the unknown. They didn't know what the right or wrong thing to do was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were just absolutely paranoid that it was going to be the end of the course for them, or there was a black mark going to be put against their name, or they weren't going to hit the parade square, and they were going to be the ones that got us the beasting, because they weren't quick enough. Nobody wanted to be that person to be blamed for the beasting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Latterly, it was like, well, it is what it is. If we get fucking shafted,
they were going to find a reason either way, and I wasn't, I don't say that as in we didn't care. Everyone had quite high standards, and people were listening. People were falling in line and listening to the lead recruits by a couple of days in. But the beastings were inevitable, and for me, it was always, this too shall pass. We're not going to do this forever. Just put the effort in, listen to what you're being told. It's not rocket science, So how did you find some of the other challenges? Because you obviously made it, different people dropped off at different points. I fucking ended up in hospital, but you managed to go through. What were some of the most enjoyable parts of the course for you? Because you covered the whole spectrum, brother.
Yeah, the most enjoyable ones for me naturally were the very active and dynamic kind of activities, I would say. So, for example, ironically, it was the beastings that I felt, I've got a little bit of control in this, because I know it's going to end. I know that I've got a little bit of control within it. I have control in this situation. The beasting is on me. The beasting that's been delivered to me. I know what's expected, 100% effort. So the beastings were all right. The milling, it was all right. It's what it is. You're just punching shit out each other. That was a very uncertain time, because obviously, naturally, yourself, Ross, you ended up landing Ross with 2 broken ribs, I think, or 2 knackered ribs.
Did he, bless him?
He ended up knackering. Good on him. I was winding him up, so he's good.
Yeah, you know what? Vengeance. It blew my mind that we were doing it on fucking concrete, because when I'd seen it in the past, my kind of fire service risk assessment head came in, because I was like, don't we do this shit on sand or mud usually, when I'd seen the show in the past? And I thought, it's a glorious location, but it's sod's law. Maybe there was subconscious something that maybe, I don't know, set myself up for failure. But when I saw it on concrete, I thought, shit, I hope somebody doesn't bang their head or doesn't bang their elbow. And then sod's law, I went down on my knee and it just fucking exploded.
Buddy, that was that moment, I think, shocked everybody. And I think, I'll be quite frank, I don't know why it shocked me. It was DS Foxy, or we can call him Foxy's now, reaction of that. It is what it is. So Ross, in retrospect, wanted to come over and make sure you were all right.
No,
Foxy's exact words were, what do you want to do? Why do you want to go and see him? Do you want to give him a get well card and a fucking kiss?
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up and move over. That
It
was
is
their
what
attitude.
it is, mate. It was just a shit set of circumstances. Could have happened to fucking anybody. It was honestly the safest environment we'd operated in. We'd been down fucking waterfalls and up cranes and, you know, across fucking rivers. It was just a really pathetic shit way to get injured, and it fucking really destroyed me mentally, to be honest with you. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, those sort of activities that you had controlling in yourself, you know, situations that you were comfortable, maybe like fitness-based activities, long drags where you're just walking miles with fucking backpacks. These are things that you can manage.
Yeah.
There was a couple of activities where we had to kind of use weapon systems, and also learn the Geneva Convention. We had to learn cover stories. You know, so for me, those were the moments that I began to panic.
Okay.
Because the way in which I try to compute information is it's much different to, I would say, the average academic or individual that reads. You know, so those moments were the scary moments where we're walking down this Vietnamese, what looked like a kind of flea market, with a handgun. We had to utilise the rules of engagement, the Geneva Convention, and make an assessment on a target, and is it right or wrong to shoot that individual? Now, Faye, give her due, was an absolute gem. She sat with me, her son's autistic, so she sat with me and made learning that information from about 10 bits of paper. She condensed it down into what looked like half a bit of paper with bullet points. Wow. And she went, that's the bits that you need to digest. Now we're going to get into a bit of role play. We're now going to kind of talk like we're experts of the Geneva Convention. So for me, that was a really active, kind of practical way of learning that information. But that was a task that I found hard, because I was then questioning myself, like I think everyone was, before I pull that gun out and shoot this terrorist, or pretend terrorist, you know, am I within the rules of engagement? Now, the guy had a red polo shirt on, blue jeans. I was looking for a tattoo. Before he pulled the gun out, I saw the tattoo, and unfortunately, I'm not massively, in fact, I don't have a clue about weapon systems. So then I'm trying to take the safety catch off, and then I'm trying to pull it from my pants, and now my hands look like a T-Rex wanking, and I'm like, fuck, help. And then the guy stuck 2 bullets in my head, and then the DS is coming over to this, what looks like a drunk T-Rex having a wank, trying to pull the gun out. Me, that's shit. You're fucking shit. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And he's like, you're not fucking sorry. You're fucking dead. And I'm like, okay, I'm dead. So it happened twice with the guns. And then the other one was I was the tail end Charlie. It was another kind of task where we had to raid a building and save a hostage. Yeah. And all my job was to carry the hammer and smash the door in. And me being me, I was like, fuck this hammer. I'm using my feet. This fucking hammer's slowing me down. I'm just going to... So rather than carry the hammer with me and kick the door in, I just fucking lobbed the hammer. I just threw the hammer away. I thought, it's a hammer. I mean, anyone can have a hammer. It's not going to compromise us. You know, the Taliban or whoever it was we were trying to pretend we were engaging with. They're not going to say, oh yeah, that's an American hammer. That's definitely the Americans being here, the Scots or the English being here, the Irish. It's a fucking hammer. I threw the hammer. And then I just I was pushing everyone out the road and kicking fucking doors in. We ended up leaving 2 hostages. We got 1 hostage. And Foxy came to me at the end, was like, why did you leave the hammer? He says, what were you told to carry? And I was like, we were told to carry a hammer. And we just brought the hammer. He went, it's just a fucking hammer. I was like, and then I wanted to say to him, no, it's not just a hammer. I know it's not just a hammer. But we just brought it. He was just, shut up, you effing C. There was a lot of other demographics he's swearing involved, and I thought, oh dear, I've got a black mark against my name now. So those were the 2 activities that I found really overwhelming. Trying to digest the information, taking the criticism based on what I'd failed in, or what I'd failed in within the task. So that was a real morale low for me. That moment, I was like, fuck this. You know what I mean? I can run for miles. I can do all these things. I'm not there. Yeah. That's not getting questioned. You know, nobody will question my 100% effort because I know I'm putting 100% in. They can say it's not 100%, but I can fucking tell you I'm now taking agonal gasps. I feel the impending fairy doom kicking in. I'm about dying on this task. I know I'm doing enough. But it was the academic parts of it, the memory retention, and the taking constructive feedback on the tasks that I'd failed in. Not because I wasn't wanting to take constructive feedback, it was guilt. I felt accountable. I felt bad. So that they two tasks kind of fell kind of nearly hand in hand. There was a lot of weapons training, a lot of reading the Geneva Convention, and then a lot of weaponry task missions done. And I found actually the most important probably part of being a soldier, firing a weapon, the hardest part, you know, because of all the rules of engagement, the Geneva Convention, and having to fucking grab it out my pants, assess the situation, chuck the safety off, shoot the guy, chuck the safety on, chuck it down my pants, and then fucking run. My brain just went into overload. So I found that part really, really difficult. And Faye helped me on that. Give her due. She was a godsend on that part.
What was it like making it to the end? What was that sense of relief like, and sort of being able to, you know, find your place through the whole experience?
Through the whole experience, the latter end of interrogation, the latter end of it, within my feet being wrecked. Just touching briefly, so there's not a lot of spoilers. But we
won't release this until after they've all come out. So
okay, mate. So basically, the interrogation, the hardest bit of interrogation were your feet for me, because they took the socks off. They undress you, boiler suit on, put the socks on, take your socks off, put your boots back on. So now my feet were red flesh. Now, obviously, there was a method to their madness. You weren't going to run anywhere, because after 12 to 14 hours, it was 14 hours. The first couple of hours, you were getting dragged about, dogs barking at you, standing for half an hour, dogs barking at you again. Then you were dragged down a set of steps, and then you were put in your boiler suit, interrogated, socks off, clothes off, boots back on. It was your feet that were wrecked. You know, so for me, that after that interrogation, you know, and getting through the interrogation, knowing that it will end was the only positive. How it ended, I didn't know, but knowing that it would end, however it ended, it would end. But my feet were fucked. They're still swollen now. They're bruised, swollen, and I think I might have a little stress fracture in my left foot.
Wow.
After that interrogation, we were then kind of taken, met the umpire. In fact, it was like Braveheart. Do you recognise who I am? I mean, me and my Scottish accent. Yes, you are the umpire. Yes, I am the umpire. What's your name? My name's Grant. Am I the umpire? I was like, right, this is getting fucking way Scottish. This is getting too Scottish for me. Like, I was like, yeah, we're all the umpire. I'm fucking Grant. Fuck off. Can I get out these fucking shoes and put my shorts on? I didn't say that to him. This is what I'm fucking thinking. Whether you're fucking Scottish and sound like Braveheart, or the John McEnroe for the Gladiator, or whatever his name is, you know, the Gladiator referee. I just need my socks back on. I got my socks back on. We were then walked off, hurdled into the van, taken back to base. In fact, no, we weren't. We were hurdled onto the parade square, walking like drunks, like the walk of shame home. Like you just fucking done some naughty business, and then you're walking home at 6 a.m, like fucking hell. I don't want to walk home in a taxi. Yeah, the walk of shame. Onto the parade square, hoods came off, facing the DS, looked around, and then there was Josh, and then who was it? Josh, me, Hales.
Hales and Faye was there,
four of us standing there. Yeah, Hales, Faye, Josh, myself. And I was like, holy shit, there's four of us. I expected a number of other characters to be there.
Yeah.
So that interrogation exposed so much character traits.
Yeah.
It exposed a lot of not being fucked with, wanting to shout at interrogators, essentially people not liking personalities. You know what I mean? Certain individuals not liking other people, so then they were shitting on other people. It almost became like Big Brother. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. There was conflicts of interest again then within the camp of people allegedly taking Vaseline and on the grand scale of the 11 days, people knocking Vaseline. But that's how it went. You know what I mean? You know,
that's weird.
Things be. Yeah. There was fractures in loyalty, fractures of trust, fractures of just general morale, and people were using that against each other within that interrogation. But then the interrogators would use that against you, and it fucked your head. Whereas I just played it simple. I ended up doing what Rudy said: play the victim, go off the script. You don't need to tell your cover story. This is what's happening. So I went on. I've basically done I basically spoke how I spoke on this podcast
Yeah.
to the interrogators. I played the sympathy vote. My home life's terrible, and I want to go home and be Mary, and the dog's dying, and this is fucking dying. And I honestly, Billy ended up saying you could have bored the shit out of Glass Eye. That was Billy's exact words to me after the interrogation. That's how good I was at fucking. I could have had a Valium sandwich and a call with the Samaritans. That's how good it was. So I fucking milked it. Anyway, got the boots off and our feet. Hales, when we got back to the accommodation and assessed our feet, the doctor was saying, listen, this is it, your feet are fucked. Ironically, my advice is, if you want to voluntarily withdraw, that's how your feet are going to get better. There's still one more task that you've got to do after this. And I was like, well, will it require our feet? And he went, most certainly. So you've got an option. Your feet will get better if you stop now. If not, you have to carry on with your feet fucked. They're now swollen up like balloons. There's no flesh on them. They're red raw. My knees are swollen. Everyone was like that. Hales was having doubt whether she wanted to continue. Josh was in there. You're doing it. This is what's happening. So all of us ended up just bandaging and zinc oxide taping our feet up like Tutankhamun mummy. You know, there was no even space between our toes. It was literally just wrapping a shit ton of zinc oxide tape around our feet. Socks on. I ended up putting 2 pairs of socks on, one dry pair, one wet pair, to try and pad my feet out. And then it went into another sickener. It just went into this, hurtled into a van with hoods on our head, running, sandbags on our back, dumped the sandbags, back into the van, hood on our head, another location, pick an ammo box up, bag on our back, run, jump off the van again, jump back in the van again, another RV, right, lose the bags. It was a mile sprint, flat out. So we've done, say, about a mile slog with the bag and the sandbag. We've then done a mile slog with the ammo box and the bag, the Bergen with the weight in it. Then we've been hurtled in back into the van to an unknown RV, hurtled out the van, and then told, run as fast as you can. This is it. This is the last checkpoint. Got to what we thought was the last checkpoint, hurtled into a speedboat, thrown out into the water, swim. Then I'm looking at Josh like, Josh, are you all right? You're a shit swimmer. Allegedly, he somehow miraculously began to swim, swam to the edge. There's now this rope at the edge of the wall, but to fucking climb up this massive steep embankment, soaking wet, feet fucked, morale at its fucking lowest, up this wall, and we were met with a DS, to which in my head I thought, this isn't it. And he went, stand down, stand easy. And we just sat, and then it was a DS figuring it out, who they wanted to take with them. And then we were told, stand by, move. And I thought that was us off again. I was like, holy fuck, I am dying. I want a custard cream and a fucking cuddle. I don't know if my fucking feet can take me anymore. I just want a fucking foot spa and a fucking custard cream or something. And then I was stood in front of them. They were like, right, basically, stand in this formation. They gave us this big fucking heroic war speech type thing. Thank you, blah, 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 blah. Stand forward, recruit number 4. Stand forward, recruit number 3. Stand forward, recruit number 2. You have passed selection. We would take you with us. Unfortunately, Faye, on this occasion, we don't want to take you with us. But in retrospect, Faye had got to the end. You know what I mean? So we were the 4 finalists, and then Josh, Marcel, and Haley were the three runners. But I'll tell you now, they took us to our fucking limits, and it was that unknown that fucked your head, wasn't it? You know, you're talking about when you're standing in that room, you were always be prepared to go again, be prepared to go again, be prepared to go again, and you didn't know when that again was. That was a part that fucked a lot of people's heads, and that's where I got to at the end. I was like, holy shit, this is how they act. You know, I was like, is this actually a fake one? Have I won? Am I one of 3 winners? I thought there was an ulterior motive. I was kind of looking over my shoulder, like, is there a fucking Apache helicopter? Is there a fucking gunner? Is there a fucking terrorist going to fucking run in front of us? And then we're going to have to recite the Geneva Convention. That was it. It was over. It was done. And I was still in my head, ready to go, let's go again. Until they came up and they gave us a cuddle and says, well done, guys. You've made it. You've made it. You've passed the selection. That was I burst out crying. I was broke. I was in tears, absolutely crying my eyes out. Went into this circle, like a huddle, football huddle, or sporting huddle. Gave everyone a massive kiss. Told them that I loved them. told them that nobody had failed. We were all winners. We were all worthy winners, and it took everyone, prior to that to get us here as well. No way I won that myself. That required every being in that place to get me, or talking about myself personally, to that place, So as much as I owe a lot to myself in regards to my character and being able to get through it, I owe a lot to everyone, all the other 19 recruits, through morale, through physical help, through bandaging people's feet up, them bandaging my feet up, through helping me academically. There's no way that I would have got to the end myself, So it required an enormous amount of selflessness, motivation, and empathy. That's where it got, that muscle between your ears. And it's still sinking in now, mate. I still can't quite believe, and I almost feel a slight level of guilt for winning it as well, because
Why?
I know how much it meant to set. Because I know how much it. Well, there's you with your fuck knee. That you couldn't expect that. And I know how driven you were to get to the end. I was prepared to get to the end, and of course I wanted to get to the end and win it. All of us did. But there were certain characters that were worthy of, unfortunately, having to leave. There were certain characters, unfortunately, that were worthy by the DS to have had their bands taken off them, medically withdrawn. But it wasn't as if you'd went up to the medic and said, "Hi, my knee's fucked," before the milling. You went in there to fucking skyrocket Ross's head off his shoulders and fuck him up. That's what we were told to do. You were going to fucking butcher him. And unfortunately, I mean, I heard that. I was like, "Woof." And when I saw you down, I saw another level of Pete in his face. I saw a vulnerable Pete.
Yeah, well,
and I was like,
I've snapped a
fuck.
tendon before, and when it happened, I had like an out-of-body experience where it's almost like you run through files in your head where you hear the pop and then the leg goes loose and your body goes, right, okay, right, try and push off the foot and nothing happens. And then it's like somebody had inserted a straw into my quad and they were just pouring water into it because I felt the knee just fucking expanding and I thought, that's blood. I've ruptured something there. Something's pouring into my knee.
Yeah.
I grabbed my hip, and you probably know of it or so on the show anyway, but because I thought I'd burst, I was hoping I'd burst my water bottle, or I thought maybe I'd landed on something and I was bleeding, because that sort of stuff you can recover from. And when none of that was there, and I couldn't put pressure through my foot, I thought, and then I fucking cried. You know what I mean? I really sat down and had a
I know that, mate. I saw a vulnerable man. Yeah, so in that part of it, there was a level of empathy and.
But man, that could have happened to anybody, and it shouldn't, and hopefully, I know you say that, and I'm not saying you're not being authentic, but you got everything you deserve, mate. You were one of the few, and even just listening now to the level of authenticity and challenge and uncertainty, your entire fucking life, mate, feels like it's been like an expanded selection of frustration, of the unknown, of disappointment, of setback, of trying to help other people, of forgetting to help yourself, of other people struggling and encouraging you to better yourself, and then finally having those moments of self-realization and self-awareness to look after yourself a little bit more, only to then go on and further help other people, which is really, when we zoom into the selection course, that's exactly what you've done, from helping Josh to swim, to looking after other people, to supporting Amelia with her health, to helping Scott up on the run. And you have demonstrated a level of authenticity that I think was very, very rare on that course, and I think that above all else makes you worthy of making it to the end.
Well, thank you, mate. I appreciate that, and it's still sinking in. But you're right. It's like I said. It's like a rebirth. It's accepting new challenges, and as much as selflessness and caring for others is important, that you can only care for others if you care for yourself, and that's
Can't
a new
pour from an
challenge
empty
ahead for
cup,
me,
mate. Can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly,
You can only help
and that's-
people from a position of strength. You've got to have that little bit of healthy selfishness to say, look, if I don't look after myself, I can't fucking help anybody.
Well, that's the next Operation Healthy Selfishness. That's where I'm now. That's exactly what it is.
Look, Grant, man, I love. I mean, we just said this morning, let's jump on and have a little chat, and we've probably been talking now for probably 2 hours, and I've absolutely loved your level of just openness, your level of fucking humility, your level of honesty, just sincere willingness to just lay yourself out there and just be so fucking honest and open, mate, has been so overwhelming. And I sincerely hope, and I haven't said this to everybody, that's not because I don't like any specific people, but you're one of the few that I sincerely hope, you know, whether it be I see you once a year or I see you every 6 months or whenever, you know, I'd love to think that in years to come we'll reconnect and have some sort of crazy adventure together. And I know we're all going to see each other. Ironically, by the time this comes out, we'll have probably met up and had that sort of rekindling and seeing the whole team. But man, you're still so young. I mean, you, like you say, you're 35 now, and I know you may feel like you're not in your 20s, but you're a baby in the grand scheme of things. This really is a rebirth for you.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And thank you for your kind words, and thank you for having the chat.
Mate, I love it. These things are so cathartic, and they're so important, I think, for us to get that perspective. And, you know, morbidly for me, I look forward to listening back on this stuff, and even for you or your partner or your family or your friends to listen back in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years time and go, fucking hell, you know, listen to myself back then and look how far I've come, or look how differently I look at the world now, or that was the moment right then when things really changed for me. And I just thank you for taking time out of your day with your poorly feet and all the other things you could have been doing today to share this moment with me.
Well, my pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure. And thank you for sharing so much of yourself.
I look forward to seeing you soon, my friend. All right.
Absolutely. Whether it's in cyber, Zoom, or in person, you take care, buddy. Love you lots, mate.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Firefighters podcast is put together to develop, inspire, and hopefully even motivate those individuals who have chosen to serve our communities and be part of the first responder family. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield. If you have enjoyed today's episode and you want to see the podcast continuing, please head over to our Patreon page where you can support the ongoing efforts of the podcast. Please hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on whatever platform you're listening to. Please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.